Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Hunt with You podcast. I'm your host, Luke. Haven't been on very many episodes here recently. Been pretty crazy with the travel. A bunch of the other boys have been holding down the fort, but I'm stoked to get back on and sit here with my buddy Kerry. What's going on, man?
What's up, man? I'm pretty pumped about this one. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. This one was a natural fit to bring you on, which is your background, and you also started the relationship with our guest here, which is kick ass. Most of you guys probably know who this is, and if you don't, you should. We've got former U.S. Navy diver, special operations instructor, clothing and equipment developer for Sitka, and the founder of Knowledge from Storms, John Barklow. How's it going, John?
Wow, dude, that was like one of the best intros I've ever had. Like I need to like when this launches, I'm gonna like record that on my phone so I can remember that. No, I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on. It's I think our circles have been kind of like in the same orbit, but you when you're all running the same speed, you never quite catch up to each other. So yeah, when Carrie reached out and then kind of started that line of communication, it was good.
Yeah, it's been one of those things. Just we really hit the event circuit this year hard, and you see people, you cross paths, you're like, oh, I need to go talk to this guy or that guy, and doesn't line up or it does, and it's so hard to like keep the communication going too. It's one of the things that I love about the podcast because it gives us an opportunity to actually sit down and have a conversation where you might not be able to carve that time out otherwise.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like show seasons and things like that. You go to Western Hunt Expo or whatever, and it's just like it's awesome to see your friends, but you never get to spend the amount of time you want, like talking to them. And then, obviously life gets in the way
Oh yeah.
the rest of the year. But yeah, but yeah, I understand like the podcast for sure because friends that have them, it's like, okay, we're going to put it on the schedule and carve out, in a set amount of time and have a conversation. So
Well, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So we got a long list of stuff to get to. We'll try to make sure
awesome,
we
awesome.
hit it all. But
Okay.
what we'd really like to do is roll it back and just get some context for you and your life. And so if we can go ahead and start with like, just talk a little bit about how you grew up, what your relationship with the outdoors was. Was that something that you found young? Did you discover that later in life? What was your kind of childhood like in the outdoor space?
Yeah. So I grew up in Ohio, northern Ohio, outside of Cleveland. And so whitetail deer was kind of like the thing as far as big game hunting. I'm sure people turkey hunted, but it wasn't really something I was probably aware of. But for whatever reason, at a very young age, like elementary school age, uh, my dad and family, we'd go out and camp and things like that. And it was just all I could ever think about. And for whatever reason, specifically archery hunting, like it just said it took to me really early on. I still literally have the first book I think I got it for Christmas. It was like, you know, how to hunt whitetails, something like that. Um, and so I was a self-taught archery hunter, self-taught big game hunter, so to speak. And some of my best ever outdoor memories, even to this day, having traveled the world. And with that said, I was an abject failure at it. I still have not killed a deer in Ohio, to be honest with you. I've scared the shit out of a bunch of them. I've killed some squirrels and stuff like that. But it's a tough thing to learn. And I'm talking back in to date myself, like the early 80s. So there wasn't a lot of information, certainly not online. So yeah, but I loved it because it was just like super. You didn't know what you didn't know, so you could go out there and just have a great adventure. And if you killed something, that was kind of icing on the cake. And so um, played sports and things like that, captain of the football team, all that deal. But I wanted more, and so I always wanted to join the military. So I ended up going to the Navy. As you mentioned, I got into the dive Navy. Immediately was sent to the Philippines for 2.5 years. Lived over there, so that was awesome. Had some amazing adventures. Got sent to the first Gulf War, the whole thing. Got to travel through some countries, do some POW, a bit MIA stuff, just looking for missing persons and things like that, and rivers and lakes. Um, Anyways, came back a couple years later. I wanted to keep kind of moving along because I was getting bored. This is pre-war, of course, and so got with the SEAL teams and started teaching them submarine operations and combat diving. And so from there, everything's like just accelerated really quick. In between all that with the military, wherever I went, Virginia Beach, California, obviously when I got to Alaska, I was always going back to the hunting aspect, right? I was also learning and kind of opening up my outdoor life, climbing, skiing, those things, not knowing exactly looking to the future where that would kind of lead me. But I was always just wanted to be outdoors, didn't really matter what, but my passion was always archery, specifically archery hunting. I don't know why, but it's, 42 years later, whatever it is, like I'm still just as, maybe I'm more fired up now, maybe than ever.
Awesome.
So what drew you to the dive piece of it? Ohio's a landlocked state. Like why'd you choose the
Yeah,
Navy, and then what was the diving portion that really sucked you in?
that's a really good question. I'm not exactly sure. Like I was really close to joining the Marine Corps, but I mean, part of it living in Ohio is I wanted sun, I wanted beaches, and I wanted girls in bikinis to be straight up, right?
That makes sense.
And yeah, and so I just thought like that. Again, there wasn't a lot of information on. Well, there was no internet, but that just appealed to me. And like living on the coast, living in the ocean, you always want what you don't have. And so that's ultimately where I went. I had learned to, scuba dive in high school and some quarry, some really dark, cold, watery thing. That should have probably told me everything I needed to know, but I'm not that smart. So, but yeah, that was kind of the appeal. And honestly, overall, like what I've been looking for in my life, just generally speaking, is just adventure. Like I'm always just looking for adventure. And obviously that adventure's outside. I don't, if there's adventure indoors, I'm not sure what it is with my clothes on. So, that's just really what I've always kind of sought and always tried to do. And I always wanted to be self-reliant. I always wanted to be that person with those woodsman skills, with that field craft, with that survival knowledge that, literally I could be dropped off in the middle of nowhere with very little kit, and be able to make it on my own and like either sustain myself there or, get back to where I needed to go. And so, you know, the diving was part of that, the survival stuff, the hunting, the climbing, the skiing, all of it to me like is is tied together.
You see, your last duty station was in Kodiak, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if we jump ahead, so I was in Virginia Beach. I after my it would have been 5 years operational diving, doing all kinds of things like picking up picking up bodies and aircraft and doing the searches I told you about and all that kind of stuff and really getting I don't know. I mean, after a couple years, I literally stopped. It's all somewhere in some Navy archive that nobody cares about. But I mean, thousands of hours underwater, months. I was counting them in months, not days anymore. I was ready for a change. And so I went over and started teaching what they called sub ops back in the day, at a SEAL training facility right across the street. So we teach guys to get in and out of submarines underwater, go on a sub trip or two to down in Puerto Rico and kind of like just work through that kind of crazy process. Then I transferred to an operational SEAL team on the West Coast, and that's where I really started to get involved. And I started to, with my diving experience, started to help run what they called combat swimmer. And then with my climbing experience that I was starting to gain on my off time, we started doing really crazy stuff like diving into a rocky cliff and then teaching guys how to climb from the water like onto the cliff, right? Because our AO at the time, our area of operations was Northern Asia, so part of that is Korea. So it's like how do you get on land in Korea clandestinely? That was kind of the thinking pre-war back in the day. So that just got me a reputation in the teams. And then when 9/11 happened, I was already going up occasionally to Alaska and helping augment that instructor cadre with our platoons and kind of being that liaison. Carrie, I don't know if you were in yet or not, but when that happened, like the world switched and we went from a peacetime footing to a wartime footing, which is a completely different military. And I'd gotten to experience just a little bit of that, little bit, uh, during the first Gulf War. But basically, I think within a month, I went from a team in San Diego, and my wife and I were in Kodiak, Alaska. The next day, I was in the field teaching guys because those guys were going immediately into Afghanistan, right? And so then it just started rolling from there. I stayed there, retired out of there, took a GS-12 job the next day, basically as a training officer, and then did that for 6 more years. So real quick, in a nutshell, it's so at this point, it's kind of like what I'm known for, right? Like cold weather warfare, mountain warfare, like survival, like all that stuff. Um, it was just kind of a fortuitous thing how it all rolled together. If not for the war, I don't know. I don't know what that would have looked like. Be honest with you.
Absolutely. So I was in the National Guard for 1 month before 9/11 happened,
Oh,
and then
no
very quickly,
shit. Wow.
yeah, very quickly put in a conditional release. So I saw a little glimpse of pre-war, military.
Yeah.
But you're right, man. When I first got, to my unit and when I was active duty, man, like you still had like the, early 90s era, the same stuff they were going to, like they went to Mogadishu with, right? Like the old
Yeah. Yeah.
LCs,
Yep.
Kevlars. Next thing you know, they're like, hey, Iraq's kicking off. Afghanistan's gone for a little bit. Iraq's kicking off. And all of a sudden we got new gear, new equipment and all that. And right before you came on, I was talking to Luke. Dude, my first 2 trips, I remember just freezing because the equipment sucked.
Yeah.
You got like, I don't even know what the uniforms are made of, but I'm sure there's cotton in them. And we had like the Polypro was like the best thing that we had. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
dude, and dude, Northern Iraq in the wintertime, it's cold and it's wet. And so shortly after that trip is when I went to selection. And I knew when you were at Kodiak, you had a huge hand in developing our PCU system. So now, froze my ass off as conventional army, went special operations. Now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I know how to stay warm now. I know you were a huge part of that too, which is
Yeah.
awesome.
So what was interesting is, being at I was at I was at SEAL Team 5 on the West Coast. Like I said, our area of operation was, that Northern Asia area. We would go do all those exercises, and focus on cold weather. And we weren't as good, quite frankly, as the East Coast teams, but we were relying on all the old Cold War tactics and gear. And, it got us through for what we needed it to do. Is kind of like, yeah, it is what it is. But as soon as Afghanistan was on the menu, that shit didn't measure up anymore, right? And when the Golden Connex box opens, and basically it's like, do whatever it takes. Money's not an option. Whatever you need to work with to get it done. And so, yes, I was on the ground floor of that, and that's where I really started to learn about all that side of the house, like how to use the gear better and the systems and all the people I got to talk to. And little did I know that would eventually lay down the foundation for me to get a job in the hunting industry. My brother jokes, he's like, I'm in the fashion industry, which in some regard I can't argue that. But that's where I got all that is trying to help the teams, and then eventually, all of SOCOM basically build those uniforms. And then it went to every. I think it went into every conventional unit at some level. But that was really the impetus. Is it's always like when your back's against the wall and you got to figure it out. That's when I think most people do their best work, and so that's what we were faced with.
So rolling back just a smidge, because I'm really curious on this
Yeah,
one.
yeah, no, ask. I tried to like gloss
No,
over
no,
a
it's
lot of
good.
things,
It's
but
just Navy diver, submarine instructor, or submarine diving instructor with the SEAL teams. Was it your like personal like pursuits that developed the skill sets that then allowed you to go up to Kodiak and then like develop like essentially what became help develop the entire military's land warfare cold weather system? Because it's just like a weird progression to go from diver subs underwater stuff to like now you're doing all this. So like I'm guessing your resume on the military side wasn't tied in with this. So was it just like you had earned the reputation within the teams and then they saw the skill sets that you had and they applied it, or like what did that look like?
Yeah, no, it's a great question and probably an obvious one. My career was anything other than conventional. Um, there's a few other, I was thinking about it earlier this morning. Like there's a few other guys that have had similar type careers, and there's probably guys I don't know. Um, but I can tell you the one thing about the SEAL team specifically is if you have something to offer and they need it, they're going to take it no matter who you are. Um, so what I didn't tell you is I got to the West Coast. I started uh, doing the combat swimmer part there. I started, as I said, teaching guys like, oh, maybe we can climb out of the water up a cliff and nobody else will see us coming. I was also considering, because it was a peacetime military, I was probably at the 10-year mark at that point, maybe getting out. And so I was going to go maybe be a mountain guide. And so I was going up to the Sierras and I was training with professional guides. I wasn't one, with professional guides to be a mountaineering instructor, a rock climbing instructor, a ski mountaineering instructor, whatever I could do. I was going up, taking courses, all the avalanche stuff. Like that's what I was doing on the weekends. And then I would come back and I'd have a buddy in a platoon. He'd be like, "Hey man, like, you think you could teach us that?" Or, "Hey, and all of a sudden, like I said, I started going up with the platoons to Alaska. And so I started being known and get a reputation. I was probably on the leading edge of a lot of that as far as what the latest techniques and things were in the military side or the civilian side of the house when 9/11 happened. And again, us needing to go to Afghanistan, I had literally helped an admiral climb Mount Rainier several years ago. And so the guy I knew in Kodiak, he was an E9. That admiral told him, I don't give a fuck what you got to do. Get whoever you need and get 12 guys and start getting the guys trained. And so because I was in with the teams already, they just called me and said, "Hey, can you be here in a month?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely, I can be here." I just had a unique set of skills, and what I found out is, I had skills that some of the other instructors didn't. The instructors had skills that I didn't, and so we basically, I hate to say this because it sounds bad, like we were still helping the guys, but like we were also teaching ourselves for an entire year. And like that cross pollination of information to like get us up to speed and make us truly the subject matter experts so that we weren't just winging it and BSing guys. And so that's where that whole thing started. I went to uh, I think it was the senior and master SF mountaineering courses. I went to the Marine Corps summer and winter leader courses, because we didn't, the Navy, I don't think they still have any of that. So we had to go get some of that experience somewhere. And so that's what we were doing. And so, yeah, my career path is just like, I don't want to say it's one of a kind because I don't know that for a fact, but it's really unique for sure. Yep.
Yeah, that's what Carrie and I were talking about on the front end. I was like, there's a gap here. I got to figure out because I just
Yeah.
got out of the army myself in May, so I'm looking at it. I'm like, this is a really unique but super cool, and I mean, it's looking at it from the value to the force. It's huge because that cross pollination with like the civilian world, and as we all know, like adapts much quicker with this stuff than the military.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you were doing like this, cutting edge mountaineering courses and guiding, and instructing, like being able to bring that over quickly was, I mean, clearly was huge for the guys that were going over. I was 11 when the towers came down. It's on with you two old guys, but I didn't come in till much later into the war.
Yeah. No, I just turned 55. So, yeah, I've been around a little bit.
And was it 55? You just got a brand new hip and you're about to go do, well, yeah, what, multiple epic hunts coming up, right? You got one really cool one here in a few weeks, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm heading to Africa. So like I said, turned 55. Right after that, like a week after that, I got my left hip changed out. Um, just wore out, right? Wear and tear, as we probably all either have or gonna have. I got to tell you, like that was such. So I was up and walking that day. I was in and out in 6 hours. It was an outpatient surgery. Like I'm going on 4 months now, I think next week. I tell you, at 3 weeks, like I almost forgot I'd had it done. At 6 weeks, I was doing almost everything I used to do back in the gym, but I've yet to this day experienced any pain or discomfort from that surgery, except for, maybe just the scar, the incision. But I had to get it changed out, man. It was like seriously affecting my life. I could only modify workouts so much in the gym, and it was getting to the point where it's like I'm not going to quit, but like, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, or I can do this, but now I got to take a week off. Like hiking was just misery. I was suffering for a couple years. That's gone. Um, and so yeah, I'm gonna go to Africa, and then I come back from Africa. I got some work stuff to do, of course, but I'm gonna go over there, bow hunt Cape Buffalo and whatever plains game I can find. Come back, do some work stuff, and then early antelope season, right into elk, and then it just rolls from there. Um, so yeah, I got a full season. Like I said, well, I don't know if we were recording or not, but it's like for me, I'm better off when I'm busy. Like I like a little bit of time, but I love what I do, both on the professional and personal side of my life. So my buddy said, he goes, "You're always working," and I'm like, it doesn't seem like it, but I guess in some regard you're right. I mean, obviously, if you own your own business, you're clearly always working, but you don't get a day off. But
Well, guys like us tend to not do well sitting still. So we've got to
yeah,
find something. That's
yeah.
why I keep asking Luke to send me new places and do new things. What do you need done, Luke? I got you.
Yeah, it was perfect. He was like, I'm basically retired. I just want to do cool shit, go cool places. I was like, perfect, perfect. Come on, let's get this done. So, it's been awesome.
And
So,
remember, John, don't drink the water in Africa.
Oh, I thought you were supposed to drink the water in Africa.
Well, you can. You end up like me.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
so you said you got out, you took a GS job in Kodiak. What was the timeline from that into like moving into the outdoor industry? And was that, I mean, I know you'd wanted to be working in that space, everything outdoors. Was that just something that fell in your lap? Did you pursue it? Like, what did that transition look like?
Yeah. It's another great question. And you guys might, at some point see a common theme here. And one of it is being lucky, but also trying to put yourself in position to take advantage of whatever luck comes your way. So I they created the GS job for me up there, and they were doing a lot of that back in the day, where they didn't want to lose guys, but they also know that you know you're burned out. You don't want to be on the road 300 days a year anymore, whatever it is. So, anyways, I did that. Kind of, I was still going in the field, but I didn't have to go in the field every evolution if I didn't want. Uh, and I did that for 6 years. Well, I realized that it was a good transition for me, but I also realized that I was, quote, the old guy, and there were some things I was stuck in my ways on, and that wasn't good for the evolution of the teams and the TTPs and all that. And so eventually I was like, I got to get out of the way so that new blood can come in and do what the natural evolution of all of these groups are, right? So now I had to figure out what the hell I wanted to do. And I was like, I wanted to go because we were coming out of the '08 financial crisis. So I'm like, well, there's two things that I think are resistant to, two things I wanted to do that I thought were resistant to a downturn in the economy. And one was getting into the pet industry, right? Because pet food, toys and shit, like nobody's not going to do that for their dog, or the hunting industry. And so I literally only wanted to work for Sitka. I literally only wanted the job I ended up getting. Little did I know, I only learned this years later, that the job I initially got at Sitka, called the Big Game Product Manager, that didn't exist. So I'm the first person to ever hold that job. And I was kind of taking it over from one of the founders, who's a friend of mine now. And they turned me down the first time. I mean, I didn't have the business acumen, right? I'm in the government. I'm in the military. We buy shit. We don't sell anything. I didn't really make anything. And 11 months later, I was working in Seattle for a company called Beyond Clothing, doing specialized clothing systems for tier 1 units, not just in the US. Did an SAS jungle uniform, did a shipboarding uniform, stuff like that. And Sitka called me and said, "Hey, lad, you want to come back and interview?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And I think I went back 2 weeks later, and they offered me the job when I was drinking whiskey in the airport flying home. And so it's been almost 10 years now since then. And I think, again, I talked to you about that when that group of instructors got together and there was that cross pollination. Hey, I got this skill set, you got that one. Let's learn from each other, make the team better. I came in without a business background, right? Everybody I worked with at the time had had an MBA. I was a knucklehead, right? But I had all the real world experience and the no shit, this is going to fucking work or we're not going to sell it attitude, like no fail, like it has to perform to keep people alive. And I think that synergy came together, and they taught me a lot about business, and I taught them a lot about testing and development, and how things had to work, and there was no compromise. And I think it was at the time, it was a perfect synergy. Just to give you an idea, at the time, we'll say 10 years ago, 2015, I was a 12th full-time employee at Sitka. Small company, even though we punched above our weight. We're probably, I don't know, we're upwards north of 70 people now. I don't know the exact number. So it was still that small group unit mentality that I was used to having, where you leveraged everybody's talents for the betterment of the team. And so it just worked. It just worked. I started going to Asia for all the Asia trips and visiting factories, and Taiwan to look at the fabrics and learning all that stuff that I never thought I'd know or care about. And I just been able to kind of piece it together since then.
So deep diving a little bit into what it takes to develop, a system for, let's say, Sitka. Can you just kind of unpack that a little bit with like what, you're talking about, you're already having meetings talking about 2026, right? So you guys are obviously have a long lead time on product development, testing, looking at the needs and the demands, like finding and sourcing the right materials. Like what does that kind of look like in the timeline? Because I think a lot of people don't realize the amount of, this is something that I've learned, and I just deal in like t-shirts and hats and stuff, like how much goes into developing a product line. Like we have like one technical hoodie that is the bane of my existence. So like I can only imagine at the scale and scope of what Sitka's doing, how complex and how much time and effort goes into it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're halfway done with 2026. I already got briefs for 2027 and thinking about 2028. Like that's, if you want to develop, I can only speak for Sitka. When I worked in Seattle for that little bit of time, everything was US made in-house. Like I could literally walk in. So let me just back up at Beyond Clothing. I could walk in on a Monday morning, talk to the designer, because I had a concept. We had a piece of white paper. That's on a Monday. On a Friday afternoon, I could walk out of there with a proto and go try it over the weekend, right? So things were a little quicker. It was a different business. But when you start to really scale, you start to build things all over the world. You start to build large volumes of things. It takes a long time, but the process is the same, which is the way we approach it at Sitka is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? So that could come from a lot of different ways. It could come from the day one, week one newbie who doesn't know shit, and he asks a question that sparks an idea, or become from the grizzled veteran who's done it forever and like nobody's ever solved his needs, right? But you start with a problem statement. What are we trying to solve? Is it something meaningful or not? And then from there you begin to build on it. And then it's like, do we have a technology? Do we have a fabric? Eventually, part of my job, it's not my most glamorous part, but it's like building out the business case. Like, am I going to sell one, or are we going to sell 100,000 of these? Like, is it worth the time and the effort and investment? But that starts on that white paper. Then we work with the designer, a good buddy of mine, and we start doing the sketches. Those sketches get to the brief where it's eventually like bought into, so to speak. Like we're going to invest the time and resources, and then we start building prototypes. And the first prototype or the first couple, depending, I always like to test it myself, and this guy Eric does as well. Like we like to test it in house, make sure that is it really what we thought it would be. Eventually, that scales into more robust field testing, where we get it on other people, so we get kind of an unbiased opinion, and then that just starts to track. And so that process, depending on the product and the technology and all that, it's a minimum of 2 years. I've had products, there's a product that's going to launch next year, next fall 25, that I think it'll be 4 years in the market of testing before it ever gets commercialized to the public, right? So, I think when you tie it back to that problem statement, we like to say uh, we're we're trying to solve problems that hunters don't even know they have yet, right? And one of our founders, Jonathan, he used to tell me all the time. He's like, man, he's like, you ask a cowboy what he wants, he's going to tell you a faster horse because he can't even conceptualize what a car or an airplane are. And so it's our job to like look ahead and go, man, this car is the next thing. The cowboy doesn't need the horse, he needs the car, and then build the car in a meaningful way that the cowboy sees the value in that, right? So that's what we've been trying to do. I'll go on record as saying I've developed stuff with Eric. I like to say it's a bold statement. I like to say that the world wasn't ready for. That's either because the technology wasn't as advanced as it needed to be with the price tag associated with it, or uh, the consumer just doesn't understand the technology enough to find the value and really kind of leverage it. So the analogy I like to use when I talk about this is your kid turns 16 and you've been telling them the whole time, the day you turn 16, I'll give you the keys and you get to drive my Porsche. And so he gets in the driver's seat. He grinds it in the third gear. He goes 60 miles an hour. It's the fastest, coolest thing he's ever done. And he's just jacked. And you're like, all right, Junior, now pull over and let me drive. You get behind the wheel. You smoothly run up through the gears to 6. You go 120 miles an hour. And he's like, holy shit, I get it now. I understand why mom hates you and you love this car so much and why it costs so much, right? Because you truly understand the performance of that. I think in the hunting industry, we are still in that evolution of the education and knowledge of the hunter catching up with technology. I think we'll get there in the next couple of years, but we've always done things, I think, ahead of our time in the industry, and sometimes they didn't do that well. Like I said, hey, at the end of the day, I got to sell stuff, and selling 200 isn't winning. So, you're like, oh, let's try it. Maybe let's put it on the shelf and pull it back off in a couple of years when maybe everybody's ready for it. So long-winded answer, but you always start with what's the problem and can we solve it? And then can we solve it in a meaningful way and in a way that nobody else has done it? The one thing I fucking hate is just copycat shit. Like, I don't want to do it. I think it's a waste of the team's time. If other brands choose to do it, that's on them. But like, if we don't have a meaningful solution that's different, like here's our take, here's our version of X or Y, it's like, that's just not probably worth doing, right? So there's a lot that goes into it that fills a day.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with just a lot of folks don't understand. That's really why I wanted to ask the question too, because there's hate everywhere, right? We get hate, everybody gets hate, but I think a lot of things that when I see with Sitka is just the price tag and all this stuff, but nobody understands what goes into developing this, the amount of time. Like you just said, you have a product that took 4 years to develop. Like, yeah, that's a lot of time, money, and resources to develop that. And then, the cost and the innovation. And like one of the things, and like I run a couple different, styles for different things, but like I have several pieces of Sitka, and it's just that extra thought that goes into it where it's like, oh, I didn't even know I needed this. Like exactly what you said. Like there was one I remember running several years ago back when I was still on the East Coast whitetail hunting all the time. I don't remember which jacket it was, but it has the slit in the back for your
harness support.
Like in a million years, I would have never thought about that. My entire life, I've like thrown on, just over there, and your harness is all rubbing, and it's like, it is what it is. But then when you've got the ability to run it through the jacket, you're like, oh, this is like, and that's the little nuances that when companies can capture that And I think it is unfortunately lost on a lot of consumers, especially in this space, because people are like, oh, I've been killing deer and Walmart camo and flannel for years. And that's how I grew up. I hunted in Carhartt and jeans for most of my life. But when you do have that gear that's well thought out, that is technically sound, that's going to make you more comfortable, it's just going to, like, if you're not sitting there in your tree stand or on the side of the mountain shivering, thinking about how miserable you are, your mind's in the hunt more. So you're just,
Yeah.
the odds of success just exponentially increase because you're not sitting there. Like, we've all sat there in army training, like just miserably freezing for zero reason. The Navy hopefully is a little smarter. In the Army, you're just cold to be cold. Like, you're like, I have this nice jacket sitting in my fucking rucksack, but I'm not allowed to touch it. I'm going to sit out here and shiver. And it's just stupid. Like, if I can like invest a little bit of extra capital into something that's really truly an investment, that it's going to take me over the next ridge 2-3 days longer to be able to increase my odds of success when I've already invested time, significant amount of money, all these things, and it's my passion. Like, that's it. It's, to me, it's just well worth it. But I think it gets lost on a lot of people in the space.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. So go ahead.
no, I was gonna say that, I mean, that's how you and I met, is because I know what it's like having substandard gear, being cold, wet, and miserable. And I know that I can tough that out, but I'm getting ready to go do something that it's in a totally new environment to me. Not only a new environment, but it's a new activity. I've never done a Western style hunt. And so now I'm going to do that in cold and wet. So, looking at, hey, Sick has done, as far as I can tell, the most research out of any of the other hunting branded, clothing industries. And then, of course, man, you've with everything you've got going on, knowledge from storms, the outdoor class, and all that. And I'm like, dude, like, John knows what he's doing. I'm going to reach out. So
Yeah.
that's
So Carrie, specifically to you in a guiding situation, right? Like your responsibility is to take care of other people, right? Similar to the military as you go up in rank, right? Like you have people that you are in charge of now. And so it's like, if you're so cold and wet and miserable that you can't take care of them because you're only taking care of yourself to survive, like that ain't cool, right? And so obviously I work for Sika. Maybe not so obviously, but I'll go on record. Obviously, I think we make the best stuff, and I can tell you why. But at the end of the day, and I truly mean this, I don't give a fuck what people buy. I really don't. Like if you like our brand and you can afford it and you understand the value, like come on in. But if you like other stuff, that's cool. But all I say is you've got to know how to use it so that you're not the 16-year-old kid grinding up through the gears, right? Because then you'll understand the value. Now, we talked about being super busy. We all talked about being passionate hunters. It's like, I want to go out there. I want to have a good time. I want to go out there. I want to capitalize on the amount of time, whatever that may be, to hunt that deer, to go on that moose hunt, whatever it is, right? Now, in a whitetail stand, I want to sit there and be engaged in the hunt and not be shivering. I want to be able to draw my bow. I want to be able to think clearly and all that stuff. And, at least for me, it's always the last day of the hunt or the last day of the season where I get that one opportunity maybe to kill a whitetail. If I'm freezing my ass off, like I'm not going to be staying there. For 3 years in a row, we had a lease in Missouri, me and two buddies, northern Missouri, and I killed 3 deer. It was between like noon and 2 o'clock in the afternoon because I could sit there all day and they were only being able to sit in the morning and evening. So it increased my opportunity to be in the field, right? Which increases success. Well, that was part of what I was wearing. I wasn't working for Sick at the time. You go on a hunt like you're talking about, Carrie, it's your survival. Like it could be your life. And yes, people were able to hunt in jeans and flannels and all that. And I hear that a lot. And check, Roger, understood. But you know what? They also got pushed out of the mountains or below tree line. They also got stuck in the wall tent. They also had to huddle around a fire when, you could be hunting. So I get it, but why would you possibly do that if you didn't have to now? And so, if you love it, if you're passionate about it, if you only have a short amount of time, or you're going to remote areas where literally life could be on the line, like whatever you choose to bring, just that the knowledge from Storm's part is just like know how to use it, man, and reach out to people who can help you do that. And all of a sudden, the value, the price tag that what goes with those things. And everybody's going to be different, but all of a sudden it makes more sense. And you're like, oh, I get it. This one piece is going to be so critical potentially to my survival. Not if something goes wrong, but if you spend enough time out there, it's when something goes wrong. How is this going to help me either, weather that storm? So that's kind of what that's all about.
Yeah, let's jump into to that piece of it. I was when we were chatting on email prior to, I was familiar with your stuff on Outdoor Class, the backcountry mission planning, but I hadn't seen anything on the knowledge from storms. I keep messing that up. So kind of just tell us what that is, kind of deep dive what, you kind of touched on it just there, but like really what was the onus for that? And then what is it, as far as the educational piece?
Yeah. So this is, a few months after COVID started. I'm working from home. I got too much time on my hands, right? And so I'm like, man, I got to do something. And like all of us, you sit there and you kind of bitch and moan sometimes. And I'm like, oh God, this guy or this brand is saying this, and I know it's wrong. And so I said, I had three options: either keep bitching and moaning, stop bitching and moaning, or do something about it. So I decided to do something about it. And I like to say I begrudgingly got on social media. I didn't have an account. Matter of fact, I had an account, and it was a picture of me and my cat. Like that was my account forever. And it was really to freak people out. Honest, that's the only reason I had the picture. And then just a little sidebar. And then friends were encouraging me like, oh, you need to put more pictures up there. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to put a second picture of me and my cat. Well, I didn't know I still don't know Instagram very well, but I knew it so poorly that I deleted the first picture, but I was able to post a second picture. So now there's another picture of me and my cat, but it's only one picture. And so for 2 years, I literally would delete one picture and I'd put a new picture up. So I only always ever had one picture. But long story short, I was like, all right, I'm being a selfish prick because I think I've got some unique experiences and knowledge that I think other people could find helpful, and that I should, be brave enough to get out there and just talk about it. And I'm not, I don't care if people disagree with me. I haven't had one argument with anybody on social media because I don't care. Here's the information. Here's my experience of where it's coming from. If you like it, awesome. Ask questions. If you don't, I'm not going to argue with you about it. Go do whatever the fuck you want. I don't care. I really don't care. And so I'm not super socially savvy, but I also didn't want it to be a complete occupation of my time. So I try to post one video a week about some type of lessons learned or how to use something, or, hey, here's something to know about down insulation to help you make your next purchasing decision, whatever that may be. Or, hey, here's how base layers work. Or, hey, here's an idea of an 8-piece clothing system if you're going to go guide up in Alaska for sheep or moose, right? And just trying to pass on my experiences and lessons learned and like how I've screwed up in the past. So maybe it stops you from making the same mistakes. And so that's where the knowledge from storms came from. Is it's knowledge acquired over time and from making a whole bunch of mistakes. And because of my instructor experience, I got to see thousands of other guys either make their own mistakes or help them not make the same mistakes, right? And learning how to teach people, it's like, how many ways are there to shoot a pistol, right? How many are there ways to start a fire? It's like, hey, wherever you are, I can help you. I'm not just going to tell you one way. I'll like figure out how you want to learn and we can figure that out. So that's what knowledge from storms is all about. And then I did the outdoor class, backcountry mission planning. I've got a second course coming out called Survival for the Modern Hunter. I don't know when it's going to launch. I hope it launches sometime in August. And then I'll do a third course with those guys at some point. But basically it's like, hey, here's my experience. Here's my here's my way of approaching things. Please reach out. I'm willing to help you. And I'm willing to tell you, I still make mistakes all the time, right? Some lessons I've had to relearn. Some lessons I'm still learning. But that's what that whole platform's all about. And it's completely brand agnostic. Like I said, I don't care if you got, Under Armour this and Sitka that, First Light that. It's like, yeah, cool. Like it still all works the same. And we can still get you to where you need to go in the best way possible with what you have to work with.
Yeah, did that. And I'm super appreciative of that kind of stuff because, like I told you before, I'm an adult onset hunter, so this will be my sixth season. And the stuff that you've put out there and some of the other guys and guys like Luke and things have really helped me out. I mean, otherwise I'd still be flapping with, I don't know, maybe a couple of animals if I got lucky. But I'm sitting on a pretty good pile, and it stinks to that shortening of the learning curve that you guys put out there.
Yeah.
And that's really the important piece. And I like that you're like, it's brand agnostic because I know you get it probably way more than I do, but it's like everybody's so gear centric all the time. It's all gear, this brand, this new piece or whatever. And it's like those baseline skills for worse. Like we're actually hosting a learn to hunt course in August at my farm in Virginia with a client and his two sons. And it's their first foray into firearms, hunting, and really the outdoor side of the house. And like when we built it custom for this client, and we talk about habitat and some hunting tactics and I'm doing a whole thing on gear, but like there's going to be a bunch of different brands. And it's like, this is how to layer. This is how to stay warm in like this type of environment. This is, the trade-offs between like super waterproof, like the only thing that's like super waterproof, super heavy and super hot. Right. So like, going through now, obviously, this, John, but way better than I do, but like just talking about that kind of stuff, land navigation, like both manual and with Onyx, we're so dependent on GPS.
Yep.
And guys, like, you don't have to know how to plot a 10-digit grid necessarily, but you need to know how to like figure out where you're at, train, associate, and then find the nearest road. And like these things that'll keep you the fuck alive is so much more important than what brand you're wearing or the latest piece of this or that. And it's just the skill set. And like on the hunting side, it's like learn these species before you're worried about all this other shit, like the latest caliber and this and that and FOC versus speed. And I feel like the hunting industry and the consumer, and maybe it's just on social and it's not like this at large, but it appears like the minutia that we focus on is the wrong stuff versus the skills that'll keep you alive, keep you in the field longer, keep you comfortable, and preparing for that like worst case scenario.
I couldn't agree more with that. Right. So the shooting, the gear, it's all awesome. But at the end of the day, it's not worth the shit if you can't go out and spend a couple days in the field or a day in the tree stand and be, combat effective or stay that way. And so what we don't focus on as much, but what you were talking about, Luke, is the field craft side of it, right? So if you've come into hunting, no matter if you're an adult onset hunter or a kid like me, it was like we used to go backpacking. We used to hike to a high lake and go fishing and spend a night out. We used to do all these things. And now, like, you may have, Carrie, you may have clients that show up that, have never been out in the bush before, right? Maybe they coming from Arizona and they don't know what rain is. Like you have no idea. And so it's like, the $10,000 rifle and the FOC, the arrow, and the latest Sitka gear isn't going to mean squat if you can't stay out there with learning all the basics, all the field craft to basically take care of yourself, the care and feeding of the hunter. Can you feed yourself? Can you clothe yourself? Can you change your socks? Can you fix a blister? All those things. Can you have, just some basic navigation? And so I think it's not as sexy, but I think a course like you're talking about, Luke, is super important, right? And then I've got friends that have come in to hunting and say they went on a black bear hunt. And maybe every spring they go on a black bear hunt. And they're like, man, this is awesome. Now I want to go on a mule deer hunt. They're like, Roger, but they don't know where to look for a mule deer, how to stalk a mule deer, what a mule deer's defenses are, and how to outwit those. And so that's I think the enjoyable part though about hunting is be a little patient and enjoy the journey, right? And so it's like, oh man, like I suck at whitetail hunting. And I told you that, right? And it was only over a lot of time and days and like finally saying, I'm going to get a lease or go to a place and hunt all season or for 10 straight days. And I normally kill on the last day because I'm just a knucklehead about it. And then slowly over time, I've gotten better, better, better. And then it's like, oh, now I want to go hunt elk. Now I want to go hunt mule deer. Now I want to go hunt, mountain goat. And just learning that species, or like this Cape buffalo hunt. It's like I've tried to learn all about Cape buffalo and their behaviors and their strengths and weaknesses and like how their anatomy is. And like that's all fun stuff. And I've been doing this for 40 years, right? So I think we do focus on the wrong thing. And sorry, man, I'm super long-winded, so just fucking interrupt me at any
This
time.
is
But
perfect. I like to set it and
I,
let it go.
I think there's an evolution in the arc of, say, an outdoorsman, specifically hunters, because that's what we're talking about. And I think at first we have no experience, and so we all use gear as a crutch. And it's easy to focus on, and it makes us feel productive to buy the gear. And like, man, I bought everything John said, every piece of gear John said, like I got it. But you don't know how to use it, right? So you're kind of dangerous because you don't know how to use it. And then you get some experience, and at the other end of the extreme is now I've got a little bit of experience, but now I'm dangerous because I think I got more experience than I know, and so now I'm cutting weight like at a minimum, and it's like ounces cut the toothbrush and all this, but now I'm really in a danger zone because I don't have the experience to actually get myself out of any kind of predicament I'm getting myself into. And then you end up somewhere in the middle, which is I've got experience and I've got the knowledge to use the gear. And so I've got just enough to like let that marry together. And everybody's going to be a little different there. Um, but people just want to race right to one extreme or the other. And it's like, or they don't understand where they are on that kind of arc. And it's like, man, if, I bring a fucking inflatable pillow. Oh, you don't like cut all your ounces and everything? It's like, no, because if I don't bring an inflatable pillow, my neck's gonna be jacked and I'm not gonna be able to glass for the next week, right? So I've just learned that over time. It's like there's no ego involved there. I can probably cut weight somewhere else. Um, but I also know that, say, whitetail hunting, because that's what you mentioned, that I can sit in a tree stand every day, all day from dark to dark, if that's what it takes, in any weather, and still be able to make that shot. Because that's a culmination of having the gear, having the experience of whitetail habitat to know when to sit there or not sit there, knowing my weapon system to be able to make that shot. But man, that just comes over lots and lots and lots of time. And quite frankly, for me, like a lot of mistakes and a lot of missed opportunities and a lot of fuck ups. And I think people just see the success and that's what they want. And it's like, oh, I'm going to go shoot a 320 6x6 bull on public land with my bow. And it's like, bro, it's like walking into an MBA class your first fucking day. You don't even know how to spell. It's like you should be patient with yourself and like just enjoy that journey that we're all on. Wherever we are, it's like we're still on that journey.
Yeah, letting the ego roll out of it, I think, is huge. And expectation management, I talk about it on this podcast all the time because, like, I just hear it. Guys will reach out to me or like talking to some of our team members or whatever, and it's like they'll their first Western hunt, a 10-day backcountry up in Colorado, and I'm like, if you don't have a background of sleeping in the backcountry, 10 days is way longer than you think it is. Like, do 3 and
Way
2.
longer.
And then maybe some,
Yep.
like break it up. And like, it's like, I'm not that experienced of a backcountry hunter because I've been in the Army. And so like, I haven't gotten to do like the extended trips. It's like 5 days is the most I've done. But I've also, for the last 11 years, lived out of a bag as an infantryman. And I grew up backpacking and like on the Appalachian Trail and all these things. And so like, I have some of the cumulative skills, but I can still look at it and be like, I don't know that I want to do a 10-day hunt right now with where I'm at, right? Because there's like home life, stress, kids, wife, like that time, and like having that realistic discussion with yourself. And then same thing with like, I'm holding out for, I want like this number of 300 just blows my mind on bulls where like guys are just like, I want a 300-inch bull. And I'm like I was just at my buddy's house and he showed me, it was probably a 270. And I was like, that's a 300-inch bull in my mind. Like, it's a good looking bull. Like, who gives a shit about the inches? But we've just gotten so worked on the scorekeeping that our expectations have just gotten so skewed as a group. And I'm concerned with that there has, and there's been obviously catastrophic incidents, but like when I see some of my buddies, like when they're going out on stuff, the lack of, it's why I really loved when I saw the backcountry mission planning, because I clearly approach it with kind of a military mindset of on how I'm going through. And I've been bad. I've just like grabbed the GPS and rolled. Like I've done some of that. But at the same time, it's like if you're going out with multiple people, like late season Colorado up in the high country, like you can get into a bad position really quickly. Like we got last year, we got socked in, foot and a half of snow, and we were hunting out of we were doing a drop camp, so we had like a camp with some cabins we can go back to. But I got soaked the first day because I had done hunt after hunt, and I forgot to wash my pants, so I had soured blood all over them. So I was wearing a pair of pants that weren't. And shout out to Sitka, my buddy was rocking the Timberlines, dry as shit. And I immediately was like, I'm buying those because they're like so well thought out. The reinforced knees, the waterproof ass, like. But it's just having the right kit, and it's like I'm not immune to it, and I have 25 years of experience with being out in the woods, but I'd never done a fourth rifle hunt in the high country of Colorado. And like, I didn't take the time to actually run through my mission planning the way that I should have. And that's one of the things I love about hunting is as soon as business is the same way, as soon as I feel like I figured it out, I get humbled like that. And it's just
Yeah,
back to
me
the
too.
basics every time. And like, I think it's one of those things is like exactly what you said of like, just enjoying the process of hunting and not the outcome, and the journey of just improving your skill set as a woodsman and an outdoorsman that's what I've really come to within the last like 3 to 4 years, instead of just focusing on the kill and the outcome. And that's my maturation as a hunter.
That's what I
Yeah, I
say
think
too, because I'm not that good.
I think
It's good out too.
some of it comes with age, right, and experience. But I'm concerned that for two reasons. One, from a business aspect, right? Because we want hunters to come in and stay in hunting because that's more consumers potentially. And also for the sake of keeping hunting alive in this country, we need more hunters. And so I get really, and again, this is me speaking now at this point in my life, but I get concerned when people say, because I'll get it on Instagram. They're like, "Hey man, like, thanks so much. Killed my first deer or elk or whatever, and I know what's coming." And then there's a but it's just a raghorn, but it's just a forky. And the first thing I always tell them is, "Hey, congratulations, I'm stoked for you." And the second thing I tell them is never apologize for what you kill, because everybody is on a different part of their journey, right? And yeah, I can show you on Instagram the mature bulls I've killed. You know what I don't show you? The pile of raghorns that I killed in between there to get to maybe to the one bull, or the 5 year stretch in between where I didn't kill a quote trophy bull. And so we get these numbers in our head, and we're trying to compare ourselves to we'll call them the pros, right? Which I won't get into that, um, but it's like, yeah, 270-inch elk, like for most people, is a big damn animal and a hell of an accomplishment,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I just wonder, like, if people aren't getting the full enjoyment out of the lifestyle because of that. Well, I don't want to talk about it because I just shot a forky. It's like, dude, did you have a great time? Did you make a clean, ethical shot? Were you in control of your emotions? Like, did you process the meat? Did you feed your family with it? Like, fuck, that should be celebrated. And I think we need to do more of that and not be, uh, so focused on the trophy. Yeah, that's great too, but that's always in the eye of the beholder, if you ask me.
Dude, yeah, exactly, man. I'm primarily a bow hunter, but I kill with a rifle, right? So, um, I spent 5 years. I haven't shot, or I wasn't able to shoot a buck with my bow. I'd killed a couple of does. I did a ram, but all the whitetail bucks that I'd killed been with a rifle, and that's after almost the end of the season. It's just frustrated, dude. I shot a dink last year with my bow. First buck with my bow was last year. Like I was actually on Veterans.
Congratulations.
Thanks. It was a dink, but you know what? I was fucking proud.
And you were
Because I
probably
like put in
jacked when
work.
you were doing it too,
Oh yeah, that's the thing. If it gets you excited,
Yeah,
why wouldn't you? And it sure as
yeah,
shit got me excited.
yeah, yeah. No, yeah, it's just so I think that, like what you're doing, with not just with the platform, but that course you talked about and what I'm trying to do, or outdoor class, or whoever. Um, I think even these brands within the hunting industry would be better served to help, not just with the conservation aspect. We need that, but like, hey man, helping hunters understand how to hunt more. Um, would certainly help, especially with, COVID brought a lot of people in. We want them to stay. We don't want them to all go back and play golf again. I wish sometimes at my trailhead they would, but yeah,
Yeah, no joke.
yeah,
Yeah, it's important, and I think we're seeing more of it across the board. Stuff like outdoor class, what you're doing with knowledge from storms, and the educational piece. That's one of our core, initiatives across what we're doing is really the education, and we're uniquely positioned with because of the way our community is that. Like this course, I'm only teaching the gear piece. Like I've got 9 instructors coming out to teach everything
awesome.
else. Right? I got
Uh-huh.
one of our guys is an instructor at the sniper school down at formerly Fort Benning, and he's coming to teach the shooting. I'm stoked for that because I could use some work on my shooting. I've been shooting my whole life. Like,
Yeah.
just taking the skill sets and like acknowledging what you don't know. I think letting that ego go. And I've been hunting for a long time, and I'm still not that good. Like, you know what I mean? And it's enjoying that journey that you were talking about, and that's really what it's changed my perspective with the entire thing to where, and some of it is the social media game. Like before I started HLE, I was kind of following that. I had a personal Instagram. I was kind of documenting my journey into hunting. More seriously, I grew up hunting on private land back home and started hunting public and realized that I wasn't a hunter. I was a shooter. I knew how to hunt one piece of property. Um, Killed a lot of animals, but it was on one 400-acre place, and then got my ass kicked. And like to Carrie's point, I got back from Afghanistan on my second deployment. I missed hunting season and was just like heartbroken. I discovered meat eater, and I didn't even be an Eastern. I didn't even know public land was a thing, really. And then I learned about that, and so I was like, I'm hunting Fort Campbell, and you can't use rifles, so I bought a bow. Hunted
Awesome. Yeah.
60 days in damn near in a row, like just the entire season. It's a long season. I killed like a 2.5-year-old doe at 20 yards for that. My still like I can remember every second of that one kill, right? And that was years ago. And I've killed a lot of stuff since, but it's still like my favorite hunt because it was just the culmination of all this stuff. And it was a tiny little central or middle Tennessee doe. Like it wasn't anything that you'd want to throw up on Instagram, but I did because I'm proud of it. And I think that we're losing that because of the
Yeah.
social thing. And then I started to run through this trap where I was like tailoring how I was hunting, the things I was doing to try to do like the content piece. And when I felt myself do that, I was like, I'm done. I stopped it. And then eventually I started my own company so I could be authentic and tell the story the right way because there's so much misrepresentation, and we probably don't have to unpack all that, but it's a double-edged sword. Like social media brings so many folks together. I mean, that's basically how Carrie and I met, was through this company and social media. And I was one of my best friends. It's how, Carrie probably reached out to you. Like it's cool and it's awesome, but there's a negative aspect of it that we have to be really cognizant of. And I think more companies and more people in the space need to talk about it so these younger hunters can have the full context of what this actually is, of like, this is just the highlight reel. It's the photo book that the outfitters have at the shows, of just showing all the
Yeah.
big animals.
Yeah.
And like, that's what it is. And
Yeah.
that's okay. But if you don't know that, you think everybody's out there hunting the Tejon Ranch, killing 410-inch bulls, it starts to really skew the expectations.
Yeah. And the kind of the idea for that first course backcountry mission planning was from having a lot of conversations with people. So not just from the military background of obviously mission planning, but talking to guys, like I'm from Ohio, so I'll pick on Ohio, but a guy coming from Ohio to Colorado, and he's done all his e-scouting, which is awesome, right? And he's dropped a shit ton of pins, none of which he's actually going to be able to hike to because they're 100 miles of hiking, right? And he gets to 8,500 feet at the trailhead, and then he throws on his 60-pound pack, 70-pound pack, because again, he's probably got a little too much gear, which is fine. And he thinks he can go climb 4,000 feet and cover 8-10 miles to get to his first pin. And then he gets crushed, he blows up, he gets altitude sick, and it ruins his trip. And I'm like, all right, well, let's unpack this a little bit. Go from Ohio at 0 elevation, basically, drive to Denver, spend a night at 5,000, drive to your trailhead, spend a couple days at your trailhead, getting acclimatized, hiking around there, maybe hiking a mile or two in with a day pack, coming out. Have you ever carried an elk out? It's a fucking big animal. Like, you don't want to be that far in without having figured this out. And then slowly work your way into the wilderness. Or as opposed to saying hiking 4,000 feet and 10 miles in to get to your camp, how about hike 2,000 feet of elevation and 5 miles and hunt your way there? Or maybe do that and then hunt the next day there. You may find that everybody's walking by a bunch of animals because they all want to go deep. Now, where I live in Bozeman, you're not going to out hike anybody. Like, you got ultra marathon runners running through like the middle of fucking nowhere 50 miles in, right? Or horse packers that have been going in there for decades. So it's like you got to hunt smarter, not necessarily harder, but we don't talk about that, right? It's like if I'm not going 4,000 K up and 10 miles in, I'm not a backcountry hunter and I can't post anything on social. It's like, no, you're just where you are in your evolution. Or, if I came from here to Ohio and hunted your farm, like I wouldn't know your farm. And so I'd have to kind of ease my way into it and kind of figure it out, right? The other thing from the gear side is it's not helpful for me to tell you what I use. Like if you're saying, hey, I want to go on a hunt in Colorado, an archery season at 10,000 feet or mule deer, whatever. What do you wear or what do you use? If I don't tell you the why behind what I use and tell you the experience I have in that environment, you're not getting the full picture. So if I say I use a quilt, a foam ground pad, a tarp, and I just go for it, right? And out telling you, I'm a survival instructor. I've got 40 years of experience. I live at 5,000 feet, so 8,000 feet is no issue to me. I've got a clothing system that I know if it gets wet, I can dry it out just by hiking around the glassing knob, blah, blah, blah. You're going to go, oh, fuck, well, Barklow says to just get a quilt and a tarp and go for it at 10,000 feet, and then a snowstorm rolls in. And then that guy gets pushed out of the mountains and he ruins his vacation and he ruins his one hunt a year. Well, that's not cool to him. But oftentimes we see people, how did the guy say it yesterday? I had a conversation with the guy. We see people who try to tell you, they try to talk to their peers and establish a pecking order as opposed to trying to help people get better at what they're trying to do, right? So it's like, I'm a badass and I need to make sure that all my friends know I'm a badass and everybody else will know I'm a badass. And so I'm going to tell you I take the tarp and the quilt and all this kind of shit and I'll only use running shoes to like hike an elk out from 10 miles back in. And then somebody inexperienced does the same thing because they look to me or you and go, oh, well, that's what he did. And they miss the why because you don't want to talk about the why. Or to your point, Gary, Luke, you start to do things that maybe you wouldn't otherwise do because you think that's what they want to see. That's not authentic either, right? And so I just think that I'm just here to try to help people wherever they are on their journey, and I don't really care, and I can put my ego aside. And mind you, it's easier, right, when we have that experience, but it's not helpful for me to promote a new product or to promote myself or promote some type of hunting to a bunch of new people who I know are going to go out and just have a miserable experience, probably get pushed out of the mountains and ruin their trip and maybe never go back. Like, I don't think that's helpful.
Yeah, 100%. Like you were talking about the altitude sickness thing. I got a really good example of that. I won't name his name, but I'll pick on one of my buddies. So on that fourth rifle hunt, we were starting out at like 72, hiked all the way up to 10, just the way it's just old reclaimed mining ground. So it's got these benches that the elk will hang out in year round, even when the snow comes in. And he's a special forces dude came out of 7th group. So down in Florida. And then me and him were stationed in Louisiana together for my last assignment. And we've been friends for years. We were in the infantry officers course together. Super fit dude. And he's the type of guy that can just like I think he was shotgunning beers like 3 days before he went to selection and then went and crushed it. Like I didn't drink for like 6 months when I was training for selection. Like he's just like that guy, just always been able to roll and he's a stud. But I was telling him, I was like, brother, like this is different. Like you've never been at this kind of altitude doing this type of stuff. And he just wants to like Billy goat up the mountain, not follow the switchbacks. I was like, I know you feel fine. It's day 1, day 2. I was like, this is, it's going to be a cumulative effect. Like this isn't a sprint. We're hunting. Like, let's go slow, steady, just like good pace. And sure enough, like day 3 or 4, ended up getting altitude sickness. Him and one of the other guys had gone up. They left at like 2 a.m. They're trying to beat the storm in to get up on this high point, and he had to turn around halfway up and walk out. And like, thank God he did. He had the wherewithal and the self-awareness and his experience to be like, something's not right. I'm smarter. I'm going to back out. And a younger guy might have just been like, fuck it, I'm just going. But yeah, he ended up getting altitude sickness. And it's like, and this is a very experienced special operations guy, like been in the infantry as long as I have, multiple deployments. And he just didn't want to listen a little bit and got himself in that situation. And luckily it was good. But it could have been really, really not. And you can get into a really, really bad situation, like really quick. You can be 2 miles from where you need to get to in that kind of country when the snow comes in, when you're socked in and you can't see anything. Like, people just, I don't think, always realize what the stakes are, even in Colorado, not that far from a main road. Like, I talked to my wife about it when she's going hiking, and I'm like, the weather report does not matter when you get above 7,000 feet. Like, it's irrelevant.
Yep.
Absolutely irrelevant. Yep. It changes like this. I've been in snow in August when I'm on scouting trips where it just comes in randomly. Like, I've got that day hiking, but I got a tarp in the back and throw that up, get it. Like, those little things that I sometimes take for granted, because it's just like what the things that I do through the experiences, because I've been cold, I've been miserable, I've been hypothermic, I've had all these negative consequences that have forced me to learn, and I still ignore it sometimes. Yeah, exactly, to what we're just talking about. I'm kind of beating the dead horse here, but it's like, just pay attention to the little things and get the experience. There's nothing wrong with doing a backpack trip in the closest mountains you can find. If you're in Middle Tennessee, go to the Smokies. Do a backpack trip, test your gear before you come to Colorado. Know how your sleeping pad is. What is the shelter you're going to use? Know all this stuff. Don't just order it all, get it, and then roll out on your hunt.
Well, the last thing I'll say about this, and to me it's the coolest part, is that all that stuff you just said, you don't need a tag. You can do it any day of the year, no matter what, whatever fits your schedule, right? That's the fun part to me. That's why I like to say there is no off season, because there's always something I can train, learn, do better, go explore, scout, shed hunt, go to the high lake and fish, go on a backpack trip, whatever it is, and just kind of build that field craft. And then when you get that tag in your pocket, when you're taking that, that 1 or 2 week vacation a year that a lot of people don't get a lot of time, and you're taken away from family. It's like, you want to maximize that time. And that's where all the lead up before that, the workup, so to speak, like, that's where that pays off, right? And that's where you're like, you and your buddy become like really close partners and like understand each other, and like, oh, you know what? Like, I've had friends, like, they were just prone to altitude sick. Like, I knew it. So we were going to move slower than normal. And they knew that I had to hydrate my ass off. So I was going to stop and get more water than normal. But we knew that because we had learned that about ourselves. And so that's why I just, that to me is the fun part, is, man, it's a year round activity. And then, oh, it's hunting season. Now I'm going to go hunt elk, and then I'm going to go hunt whitetail. And then and it's, then you get to go play the game and not just scrimmage. Right. So that's kind of where the kind of the payoff comes.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. I love that. I try to model my retiree life kind of similar to that, like it is a workup hunting season, because it's become a major part of my life. Like I was talking to you, man, I lived the dream, I retired, and now I'm living the dream again. It's just different, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, hunting's a great transition out of the military, because there's the community, the brotherhood, sisterhood around it. And then it's mission planning. It's going through the exact same thing. How are you preparing your gear? It was a very natural, I started this company while I was still on active duty, which was even better, because I was very smart and stupid at the same time. I used to wake up before PT at 4 a.m. to fulfill get orders prepped, and I'd run out on my lunch breaks and drop them at the post office. It's crazy, but
good for you, man. Damn. You're more ambitious than I am.
Stupid. The word is stupid.
Yeah.
But no, it's been great. And I love it. And then we don't want anything that we've said today to kind of come across as negative. It's like, you should pursue this, it's a passion worth pursuing. You should just focus on the skill sets and the experience and the knowledge base and the things that are going to keep you alive more than the latest tree saddle or whatever the hell is coming out. Because there's just like a lot of important stuff, and the stakes get high. And like when you're going to Alaska to do what Carrie's doing, like it's worse. And I think we lose that a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm probably more nervous about this than I was going to like Afghanistan or Iraq, man.
Well, you got a big support network, right? When you go do those things, and
Yeah.
and you know, you've trained up, you've done that work up, and so you have that confidence. But if you don't, then you know, I think we just all need to figure out how to get it. Yeah, I don't want to come off as negative. I hope I'm coming off as somewhat positive in that we should have patience with ourselves. We should relax a little bit. We should enjoy the journey. This is supposed to be fun, right? And yeah, absolutely, we're all gear nerds and we love it. But there's no like magic bullet where, you know, if you buy a full set of Sika gear, you're going to be able to go kill a big bull or weather a storm. And so that's where just having that awareness, like your buddy, like your friend at altitude was at least aware enough to know I should turn around and go back, right? Now, maybe his enthusiasm and fitness helped get him into that situation, but he was aware enough to back out. If you're not aware, yeah, that's where bad things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, you know, that's why I say it's a year-round approach. So if I'm going to go, you know, we'll just keep picking on Colorado because why not? But, you know, if I know that I'm going to draw my elk tag this year, I'm going to go do an over-the-counter elk hunt. You know, if I can, could you go black bear hunting that unit in the spring? Could you go there and, you know, do a backpacking trip or do a fishing trip to start learning the land and learning how you, you know, do get affected by altitude, all those things. And so it really becomes a lifestyle. It's not a sport. It's a lifestyle. It's like what we live now, right? I mean, the three of us for sure are living that. Um, and then, you know, the gear just comes and goes and you're able to leverage it to its fullest potential. It's like I talk about an 8-piece clothing system, right? Or people ask me about, you know, what should he use, a tent or a teepee? I'm like, oh, you know, I'd start with the tent. That's not to say like I've got a warehouse damn near in my garage, right? Like I got a warehouse full of tents, stoves, puffy jackets, like, you know, the whole thing. It's like because now it's like, oh, I'm gonna take this stove for this and this shelter for that. And so that's where the gear comes in. It's not like I'm telling people, oh, only have one thing. It's fun. Like we're supposed to have fun. But also realize that, you know, if you're not at a 401 level, then be a little patient with yourself. Maybe start at a 201 level, you know, or maybe reach out to people or listen to these podcasts and like there's more knowledge now than ever. Like in some regard, I'm kind of pissed, right? Because I'm like, man, I pissed away like decades of my life, like beating my head against the wall, like learning how to whitetail hunt. You know, if I'd have grown up now, I probably could have lessened the steepness of that learning curve quite a bit.
I
So
wish I
it's
was.
a great
I
time
appreciate
to
you
get into hunting and fishing, I think.
Yeah, I wish I knew now what I didn't know when I was at Fort Campbell trying to kill that one lone doe. I'd have maybe some more hardware on the wall from Middle Tennessee. But
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys doing that, beating your head against the wall for decades, so I can just jump in, you know, my mid-30s.
Yeah. But
my brother and I were talking about that because we've recently been able to hunt, I know, all over the country, and we're like, man, our kids are not going to have the same struggle with hunting that we had. Like
no,
my
no, not at
my
all.
boy and girl are going to just grow up just with cool. I'm going to make them. I'm going to be deliberate in how I start them out. They're going to start out just sucking. Like, here's some Carhartt, here's some Walmart blue jeans. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
Manufacture some hardship for them. But John, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I know how busy, invaluable your time is right now, this time of year. So thanks so much for jumping on.
I really enjoyed the conversation. You know, hopefully we can maybe jump back on and have another one at some point in time.
Anytime, absolutely. It'd be great. Maybe later in the season we could recap Africa and your elk hunt and
Oh yeah,
all of that.
yeah,
That'd
we
be
could
awesome.
tell some more stories for sure and see how we did. I guarantee you, we're gonna have some lessons learned. Every one of us is gonna have some lessons learned.
Every time.
What to do, what not to do. Yeah.
I started
I
making.
can't wait to hear about Carrie because you know I'm excited for you, man.
Dude, I'm fucking so stoked, man.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Carrie's gonna come back with all the experience now. He'll be teaching us some stuff.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
No, the lessons learned thing I think is just last year because I keep sometimes you make the same mistakes and you're like I knew better than
Oh
this.
yeah,
I just have like a running note on my phone now that's like every time I fuck up during hunting season, I just switch off on X and go to that. So it's like it's real long. So hopefully I can start cleaning that up a little bit.
yeah, yeah. It's like every time I go out in the winter, my first winter trip, I'm like, ah, forgot that. Up, should have known, but and it's like I'd done this forever, but it's still like, up, yep, gotta take half a step back to go forward. But yeah, those lessons learned, which I think, from the military, it's such a huge thing, part of our life. But I think those are just little things that I think hunters of any experience level can learn from, and just documenting those and like going back and being humble enough to go, yep, I screwed up. Like, you know, won't do that again. Knowing you probably will, but at least you'll know you're doing it sometimes I know I'm making the mistake when I'm doing it. I'm like, son of a bitch, what am I doing?
Yep, I do. I have that
Yeah.
same internal dialogue. Like a lot of times mine's like, I'm just going to go one more ridge, one more. And I'm like, I know I don't have time for this. Curiosity gets me. And then I'm like halfway up there and I'm like, this is a terrible idea.
Yeah, yeah. Well, sometimes the burnt hand learns best,
Yeah,
but
for sure. But
yeah,
yeah, Carrie, you got anything to wrap us up with?
No, man, this is awesome. Hopefully we can catch up after Africa, and
yeah.
looking forward to hearing those stories and then sharing some of mine when I get back. And I
I
appreciate all the help.
can't wait to hear it, man. Can't wait to hear them.
John, you got any closing thoughts for us?
No, like I said, I appreciate the conversation, but I really appreciate what you guys are doing. Um, and I love it and fully behind you guys. And yeah, it was a pleasure.
I appreciate it. It was great to talk to you in person. Hopefully we can link up or talk to you on the podcast. Hopefully we can link up in person one of these days.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yep.
Love to.
All right, everybody. As always, we appreciate the hell out of you guys. We'll talk to you next week.